episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. It is not just a tagline, it is our reality, and you're about to meet two of them in just one moment, and a third is on her way. The third happens to be a courtroom insider, and we are coming to you live from Studio 1K, named after Carm, my mom. Looking for her cardboard cutout, but she is. We are here because we were in at a book signing in Tampa. We did a live podcast and had to drive back with all the kiddos. And since we're like the Fisher Price podcasting company, we didn't have time to set up the other studio, so we will be back there. I'm hoping tomorrow morning for closing arguments. You heard me correctly. Closing arguments. For those who have not been following this case and have been living under a turtle shell, let's use that metaphor for this one, then you don't know that on January 29th, 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, he was found dead outside of 34 Fairview Road, a home in Canton, Massachusetts. Since that fateful and horrible day, there's been a pretty big division amongst people who are watching this trial. Some believe that Karen Read is responsible for this death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Others believe in the so-called frame job, that these officers, law enforcement officials who were out with John O'Keefe last night somehow got into some sort of physical altercation, and he was killed during that altercation, and it's all a massive conspiracy, a massive cover-up. And finally, we are at the end of testimony as of today and tomorrow morning. Closing arguments here to discuss. We've got Christina Rex. She's a reporter for WBZ TV News. She joined the station in August of 2018, well before all this, from Portland, Maine. She's going to law school at night. She's our courtroom insider. She's going to tell us what it was like in there today. Then we've got Jonna Spilbor. Got to do the women first here, Peter. Introduce them before you, no offense. But Jonna Spilbor, she's a popular and outspoken attorney, a columnist, a legal analyst, appearing regularly on Fox News Channel, the Fox Business Network. She has a radio show in New York, Hudson's Valley, and she's a very savvy criminal defense attorney. She is here. And Peter Elican, last but not least, a Boston-based criminal defense attorney, a bar leader, an expert on-air legal commentator. You'll see him on Court TV. He's leaving here at 7:50 tonight to go hop on Court TV, even though more people will be watching this, even though Vinnie Politan wrote a blurb for my book, and I really love the guy, and I owe him for that, but still, more people will be watching this, I hope, at least in my dreams. Christina Rex, excellent to have you back.
Hi.
Hi, great to see you again. Was there you see, she's wearing a sweater in Boston. It's chilly in Boston, short sleeves in Miami, even in the summer. Even in the summer, they're in long sleeves in Boston.
No,
Christina
it's so
Rex.
hot here, but air conditioning. It's cold.
That's what it is. I heard Judge Canoni saying she didn't want to shut that AC off today. But was there a collective sigh of relief in that courtroom today when the defense rested? There was no rebuttal witnesses called, and we knew we were at the end here just ahead of closing arguments.
There was an audible and kind of a tangible sigh of relief in the room. Even Judge Canoni, as soon as Alan Jackson said the defense rested, Judge Canoni stood up and moved over to the corner of the bench and looked over towards the jurors and said, "Jurors, after all of these weeks, that's it. That's all the evidence you're going to hear in this case. That's all the witnesses. Testimony is done. The case is almost in your hands." So there definitely was that sigh of relief moment.
Yeah, it's Peter Elican. Is there going to be, I don't know, after this trial with all the hype, is there going to be sort of a post-traumatic stress disorder or depression after this? I know you're not a psychologist, but you're a human observer. What do you think? Do you think there's going to be a letdown? That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's as if they're going to take a pin and kind of let the air out of us. here. It's been amazing to me that the interest in this case here in Massachusetts has just not wavered a bit. You figure after a few weeks, somebody would say, okay, enough already, I'm getting bored. It just keeps building and building. And what I hear is all the judges in Massachusetts are watching this. And I talk to prosecutors all over the state, and they're fixated on it. And the whole legal community is, and certainly the public. And from what I've been talking to the local reporters and anchors, and they will say to me things like, every time we have a show, anything on this, our ratings go, shoot sky high. So there is such an interest here that we're all going to have to go and find a new hobby or something to do with our find meaning in our lives now that there's one purpose of our life is slowly ending. We're all going to go into decompression, I guess.
I'm going to have to get a ping pong table and start having battles with my kids this summer. I feel it. It's going to be it's going to be weird after there's no more Karen Read trial. I missed this, but Christina would not have missed this. Did Judge Canoni ever openly ask Karen Read, Christina Rex, if she wanted or intended to testify?
No, she didn't, or at least not in the presence of the jury in open court. She did not. There was a little moment today at sidebar after the jury was long gone at the charging conference the lawyers had where Karen Read went up to sidebar and spoke with the judge, but that was after witnesses were done. There was no moment where the judge asked her if she wanted to testify. The defense just never called her.
And we'll get to that charging document conference in a moment. I wasn't paying close attention to that, but Jonna Spilbor, after court today, Alan Jackson, and here's a direct quote: "We feel great. What a way to end a case, right? With a little truth and professionalism. It feels, you have no idea how good it feels to finally get this thing done." And then they asked Karen, do you think how do you think the experts were today? She says, very professional, knowledgeable, thorough. Jonna, you've been there before. High profile case. You take it to the finish line almost. What is Alan Jackson? What is David Yannetti? What are Adam Lally, even the assistant district attorney? What are they all feeling tonight?
I think the defense team should be feeling pretty good. And by pretty good, I mean better than the prosecution, because I don't know, you guys, I've been doing this a long time, practicing a long time, analyzing a long time. I don't know if I have seen a case with this much reasonable doubt in a very long time. And if you're sitting in the jury box right now, this is what I was thinking about today. If you're in the jury box and you can't say to a reasonable degree of certainty how John O'Keefe died, it's done, because that is the thread that will unravel the whole case. If you don't know how he died, if you don't know whether it was by getting hit by Karen Read in her SUV, if you don't know whether it was because he tripped over his own 2 feet, hit his head on the sidewalk, and then died in the yard, or if you don't know whether he got punched in the face or the head a couple of times inside that house, walked out, and then dropped dead, you have to find her not guilty. And so if I were on the defense team right now, I'd be feeling pretty darn good. They did a very good job of poking holes in the prosecution's case.
You could say that again, because I would say much better than 50% at this point feel that she's going to walk, meaning Karen Read. But I don't know. I've been in news long enough to never be too overconfident on either side. You just never know what a jury of your peers are, what they are thinking and what they're going through, and what their thoughts are on this case. Only they know that. Lindsay Hendricks here for Christina. I noticed that when Judge Bev asked the jurors if they could go until 1 today, shocking that she would go to lunchtime, and she responded, "All of you are nodding yes. Did you notice a difference in engagement with defense experts?" Interesting question. Did you notice anything different tone-wise or otherwise in the court?
I'll take this as 2 questions. All of you are nodding yes, that was happening. I think that the implication that the judge didn't say out loud was, if we go a little past 1, we're going to be done here and I'll let you go. And so they were more than happy to stay. The difference with the defense experts that I noticed as far as engagement goes is that their testimony was a lot quicker than many of the prosecution's experts who were on the stand for many, many hours. And so, there was less opportunity to maybe be less engaged because they were really only on the stand for, I think direct examination was like 40 minutes for each of them. It was really quick. So they were definitely, I mean, the jury was engaged. There was no like, there have been other days when there's been like active nodding. I didn't see that today. I did see confusion on many of their faces when the experts testified that they were hired by some mythical third party and the jury doesn't know who that is. We know that it's the DOJ and the FBI, but when they were testifying that they were hired by a third party who's not the prosecution or the defense, the jurors, you could see they were like looking at each other, like, what is that about? But otherwise, yeah, they were pretty engaged today, I think.
Milo's mom here with a question for me. Joel, when you say she's going to walk, that makes it sound like a guilty person getting off. Is that your belief? Maybe that is a Freudian slip on my part. I got to be honest. At the beginning of this, I've been open about this. I felt strongly that she's responsible. I still think there's a part of me that believes she is responsible for this, not necessarily intentionally. I just don't understand. What's thrown me off is obviously the horrific police work that's gone on. The investigation was just, mind-numbing. And, I don't know. I don't know what happened that night. I don't think anyone knows. I've read accounts from, pro defense and pro Commonwealth. People are going to say, oh, you're a fence sitter. You can't. I really don't know. I just do not know. I still don't know after all this time. I know they're expert witnesses. Peter Elican, who came on to this today and basically said the injuries are not consistent with a car accident. Even the medical examiner for the Commonwealth said that. I don't know what, you've got to listen to the experts, I guess. I don't know how a jury goes in there after hearing that and can still say that she was struck by a car unless it's a visceral feeling. Could you explain it any other way?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, Peter. Yes.
Yeah. So many times we have a trial, and as the testimony comes out or as the expert witness talk, we suddenly arrive at probably an arrival of the truth. We say, oh, okay, we have a few aha moments. There's some smoking guns. All right. We all kind of know what happened here. This is one of those cases we're never really going to know, I think. You start out from the premise that the prosecution started with this case where, first of all, there's no eyewitness at all to it. So, and then there's also no mode of death here. They had the medical expert, the official from Massachusetts, say a blunt force trauma, but we can't say it wasn't a punch or a baseball bat or it was a car accident. So you start out with that. Also, you don't even know how this person died, and there's no witnesses. So the fact that we never, and the investigation was so horrendously done. It was one of the worst I've ever seen. And a lot of people will knock certain police investigation. This was extraordinarily bad. So things weren't even looked into, and there's all kinds of holes open here. So I don't think we're ever going to really get to an arrival of the truth, other than I'm going to basically parrot what Jonna said, is that it's rare that you see a case with this much reasonable doubt. It's often a lot closer than this, but it was just every step of the way, every person who testified for the prosecution, the defense did such a great job of examination. They really found holes in it. And for every forensic expert that the prosecution had, it was like checkmate. The defense had somebody to say the opposite. So when the juries kind of, are meeting and talking about it for the first time, I don't know how they can come to some conclusion that she's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. At best, they could say, gee, I don't know what happened. I heard this person say this, that person said, yeah, I don't know who to believe. And if that's true, that does favor the defendant. And this case is just an extraordinary mountain of reasonable doubt here. They did not nail this down either way.
Warlock here says acquitted due to bad investigation. Now I think she's innocent. That's pretty much where I'm at. Followed here by I think she hit him accidentally or not, but KR will walk. That's sort of where I sit with all this. Jonna Spilbor, Peter Elegant said something eloquently, as he always does on our show, one of the last episodes. He said, I'll tell you a secret, criminal defense is not about a search for the truth. It is a search for doubt. And they certainly found that doubt on this journey. Do you feel, though, some level of empathy or sympathy for the O'Keefe family that they might not get justice for their son and their brother here? We might never really know what happened. Does that bother you at all?
Well, of course, I think we all feel sympathy for the family. They lost a loved one totally prematurely and under these mysterious circumstances. And no matter how you slice it, no matter how he died, it wasn't good, right? It either was some sort of horrific accident or it was intentional. And again, we'll never know. But I think anybody in their position, if you lose a loved one and you believe it's at the hands of somebody else and you never find out what happened, there's going to be this void. But you also don't want the wrong person to be convicted. We don't want that as a society. So they might, who knows? I mean, look, I'm sure they're on the side of the prosecution, but they've listened to every day of this testimony, and they too might be saying, you know what? Maybe there's another explanation for this, or they might be a little bit perturbed at the police investigation. Like, look, the prosecution knew that Proctor's texts were going to come out, and they knew that. I mean, that was pretty horrendous. They knew that they had some bad witnesses. They knew that they had some bad facts, and they brought the case anyway because that's what prosecutors do. And they had, as Peter said, they had like these small holes in their case. But by the time the defense got done with their cross-examination of the various witnesses, you could drive a truck through those holes. So my heart goes out to the O'Keefe family for sure. But maybe in their heart of hearts, they're not convinced that they have the right person sitting at that defense table. That's all I can say.
Christina Rex, that's interesting and well spoken by a very accomplished criminal defense attorney. Karen Larimer here says he was not hit by a car, dog bites, the usual comment, I guess. Hey, wait, Joel, did you listen today? Yes, I did. Keep in mind, anytime that I am watching, I am multitasking, so there's always things that I am, maybe missing. But to that point, Christina, we had apparently Joel didn't listen to the entire trial. Yes, I am very busy crocheting all day. I don't get to watch the trial that much. I'm trying to finish a quilt for my mom. Christina Rex, these experts today, are they unequivocally saying that he was not struck by a car, or are they saying they can't be certain of this? Because I know Rensler, I'm mispronouncing his name, at one point said the physics and the science doesn't lie. It was one of those two witnesses.
Yeah, they're unequivocally saying that the evidence does not show he was hit by a car. And I'm speaking just for the two accident reconstructionists.
Right.
We're pretty solid in that. Pretty sure of that. And one thing that I think was pretty interesting, I assume for the jury, but also for the public to hear about their testimony, is the test that they actually ran. The two simulations they ran involved the possibility of John O'Keefe throwing his cocktail glass at Karen Reed's taillight to see if that could cause the damage that was on her car. And then the other one they called a drop test, but it involved John O'Keefe being hit in the back of the head by the car because he had that skull fracture back here and a laceration on the back of his head, a big one. And it was a little bit interesting to hear because neither of those is the Commonwealth theory of the case. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't know what the jury will do with that, but neither of those tests that were conducted is what the state says happened here.
That's interesting. Peter, here from Lily Benjamin for the panel. How big a part could her being overcharged play in a not guilty verdict and a complete acquittal here on the fact that she's overcharged?
I don't know if it'll play a big role, but it's certainly a negative for the prosecution. When you overcharge and it looks ridiculous after a while, then the jury says, well, they're wrong on that. What else are they wrong? And how else have they wrongly charged this? I mean, here, the idea of charging her with second-degree murder, that would be an intentional killing. And with these 80-something witnesses, I didn't hear any evidence that she intentionally killed them. Nobody heard her say, I did it on purpose. I never. So it's just not there. So they have a charge that's just hanging out there that I don't even think they tried to prove. I don't know who made the decision back in that DA's office to throw in the murder, because at best, if you didn't believe her, you'd be left with what was an accident or spur of the moment anger or something, which I don't believe. But that's the best you can come up with. But when they don't even lay out any evidence whatsoever to back up the charge, it doesn't help, because they say the jury's going to be sitting there and saying, well, they said murder, but there's no evidence of murder. Who knows what else they made up here, and just threw it out and see what sticks. And so I don't think it really helped the prosecution that they decided to overcharge and throw that radical major charge in there when they had nothing to back it up with whatsoever at all. It wasn't even a weak argument they gave. They really threw nothing in there.
Yeah. By the way, everyone's coming at me, which is totally fine. I mean, to be clear, I don't think I could convict based on this expert witness testimony. I mean, they're saying it's not from a car. I have my own thoughts. I last night on our ride home, I mentioned this during the live this morning. It's gotten so bad that Carm and I were actually listening to the cross exam of Jen McCabe on the drive home last night by Alan Jackson, because we haven't had enough Karen Reed. And this is where I'm going to take a ton of heat. I felt like Jen McCabe was actually very credible during her testimony. Carm thought completely the opposite, that she was hiding something. So I go back to the conspiracy. I just find it so hard for all of these people to conspire together. This is where everyone's going to call me a dum-dum and an idiot. They're all friends. It's a tight-knit community. It's Canton, Mass, et cetera, et cetera. I just have a very hard time believing that so many people conspired in this. And then the issue of throwing a police officer out on the front lawn, just a lot of this doesn't make sense. If there's people out there who say it makes perfect sense, I think you're lying to yourselves, because I think there's so many factors in this case that are just sort of inexplicable. But Amy Z here says the Commonwealth wants the jury to believe no one leaving the house that night saw John in the yard, but not believe Lucky that he didn't see anyone. Good point. I guess playing both sides of the fence there, which people are accusing me of. Here's another quote, Jonna, from Karen Reed about going into deliberations tomorrow. So we're going to get closings. Each side is going to be given 1 hour, from what I understand, the Commonwealth and the defense, and then they will begin to deliberate. So there's a good chance we're going to get a verdict tomorrow, and we're going to be live with everything, with closing arguments. What are you saying, Christina?
I don't know if there's a good chance we're going to get a verdict tomorrow.
All right. Maybe not. Maybe not. We'll get your take on that in a minute. We don't know. Yeah, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But this was Karen Reed's quote, Jonna Spilbor. Just be positive about deliberations. Try to feel strong. Few of my lawyers and my parents just have faith. We've left nothing on the table. I've worked every day at this for 2.5 years, so there's nothing more I can do. What kind of feeling do you think it is? You've been the defense attorney. You have not been the defendant, Jonna, but you've been with them. What's it like for them when it's literally taken out of their hands and into a jury of their peers? There's nothing else you can do.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a scary moment. And the one, well, maybe more than one, Karen Reed, from time to time, sometimes she would come across almost like a little cocky, which I don't care how innocent you are or how innocent you believe yourself to be. The courtroom is no place for cocky, and you have to be careful and temper how the jury's going to look at you and the people in the gallery are going to look at you. You just have to be very, very careful of that. If I were her, I probably wouldn't have said a peep after this case was closed. And I think I'll call you out. I don't think there's going to be a verdict tomorrow, because the more doubt you have, the longer juries tend to take, because it's a lot to go through and people are going to have different opinions on things. And it could be a few days until we get a verdict. But as you also pointed out, you just never know what a jury's going to do. But I think tomorrow will be awfully quick, unless they're all convinced that there's reasonable doubt. Then I suppose we could have a very quick verdict.
And Christina, just to your kind of head nod there. In this case, we've heard a very quick verdict could actually be beneficial, I guess, to the defense, where it's usually the other way around. What are you hearing about that? And do you believe, because it sounds like you believe that the deliberations will go for some bit of time, with a caveat that no one really knows, but go ahead.
Yeah, nobody really knows, but you are right that everyone in the legal community is kind of saying this case flips the usual on its head, where a quick verdict would probably mean not guilty here. And I think part of that is just looking at the Commonwealth's case, 68 witnesses. The reason I'm not saying I think it's going to be several days. I really don't know. I think tomorrow would be shockingly fast because they're probably not going to start deliberating until midday or afternoon. So that would mean like a couple hours and that's it. And the reason I don't think that that's likely is just because in this trial alone, there's over 650 evidence exhibits. And like, if the jury wants to see any of that, that's going to be more than a couple hours, you know? So I just find it hard to believe it'd be that fast. But I'm not a psychic.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. Charlie Adelson, I covered that trial, was much shorter than this. It was under 2 weeks. They came back in under 3 hours, and that was with lunch, but that was really one-sided. There was none of this that's going on here. Let me get Peter back in because he's going to have to jump in about 20 minutes to go do court TV. So there was another tweet that went out, basically Peter asking, how will deliberating jurors be selected? How do they choose the four-person? What is the process now? Because there are alternates. Who's the alternate and who are the deliberating jurors, and how do they decide this?
It is a roll of the dice, and I'm not even really using that as a figure of speech. What they actually do, they have this little thing where they put the jurors' names in or whatever, and they have a tumbler and they pick them out. It's like a bingo game or something, and that's how they do it. So it will be absolutely random. There's no scientific thing where the judge says, oh, I want this person to be the juror, another person. It is completely, totally they pick the thing out of a hat is what they do. And I agree that this case, I don't see it happen, the verdict coming in tomorrow, because first of all, we have a couple of hours of the closing arguments, and then there'll be jury instructions that'll go on for an hour or two. And then if they start deliberating, let's keep in mind, we've all been talking about this case for weeks and weeks and weeks. The jurors were forbidden to talk to each other about it. And they can't even look at their own notes. They have to like leave them there every day. So this is the first time ever that they will be able to look at each other and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? And they have to go around to each of the 12 jurors, and then they go back and forth. So I don't see that happening in like 3 hours. It would be sometime later this week. I don't see it tomorrow, but who knows, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, something like this. I don't see it going on ever, forever, like day after day after day. But I would think at least a couple of days, because when you have that many witnesses and that many exhibits, and so many jury trials have 5 witnesses or something, and here they have to kind of go through everything. So I think they're gonna have to do a bit of work. But if it's quick, I have a feeling that it's going to be in favor of the defendant. However, I will say this one last caveat that we always say, all of us attorneys, we've been surprised before. We've seen it work both ways. We've seen people who were absolutely guaranteed we knew they were guilty, and the evidence really proved it, and the jury comes back not guilty, and we're scratching our heads, go, what did they see? And we've seen it the other way around, where somebody's the evidence is so strong that they're not guilty and it wasn't proven, and the jury comes back and says guilty. And again, we're in a state of shock. And what in the world were they seeing? That's crazy. And so I am never surprised by what a jury. I've given up long ago trying to guess what a jury would do. Here, the conventional wisdom is that there's too much reasonable doubt, though, and she will not be found guilty.
You heard it there, Peter Ellicant. She will not be found guilty. A ballroom gunfight. Christine, I know you had your hand up. I don't know if it was in response to this, but I did not see this. Judge Bev stated that defense gets closing. The Commonwealth only gets a rebuttal. Is that true?
No,
that's not true.
We'll get closing arguments an hour each.
Okay, that's what I thought. Were you raising your hand for something else there, Christine?
I was raising.
The only other person that raises their hand is my mother, so I like it. Go ahead, Christine.
I'm the daughter of teachers. It's a habit. I saw all the comments flowing in saying I thought the judge said she gets to pick the jurors, and I just feel like I need to clarify what she said. she said she picks the foreman for the jury. So Judge Canoni will pick the foreman. And then, like Peter said, it's actually a bingo like roller thing that they pull the numbers out of to pick the deliberating jurors at random after that.
And Christina, I know you retweeted and I retweeted a reporter outside the courtroom early this morning. There had to be 200 pro Karen Reed.
That's my coworker Penny.
Yeah, protesters, for lack of a better, demonstrators, I guess you would call them. What was the scene outside the courthouse like this morning?
I had hoped you would ask about this because I can say without a doubt there was a shift in the air today. There was like 5 times the amount of people who are usually out there. I was stuck in traffic for almost a mile to get to the courthouse with people backed up trying to park on the street. There were probably at peak around 250 people in pink or in free Karen Reed gear. I talked to a woman who had just flown in from Alabama to try and be here during the verdict. My coworker talked to somebody from North Carolina. And so for me, I'm in the courtroom, so I'm not usually with that group out there. However, the way it kind of impacted today, like the real difference I felt is that scrum that you see us do on the way out of court every day when all the reporters are trying to talk to Karen Reed and her attorneys, her fans and her supporters like swarmed them today. And usually it's the same group of people who stay like lined up on the sidewalk and they're cheering as she walks by. But it was like almost like rushing into a concert space because you're trying to get a front row seat today. Everyone was kind of swarming in. Some of her supporters who have been there a lot were like playing impromptu security for her to try and get her through everyone, like blocking the entrance to her car. I had to say to one of them, like, excuse me, like I'm interviewing her. So there was just a real shift in that outside environment today. And I can only imagine that's going to increase this week as we wait for a verdict.
Christina, how do you think the media spectacle has influenced Karen Reed? I mean, is she enjoying this, do you think? Is she shying away from it? She liking the spotlight?
Joel, you walked me right into this. I asked her today, I asked her on the way out of court during that kind of chaotic scene. I said, Karen, do you notice the amount of people who are here today? It feels like there's a lot more than usual. Like, what do you think of all of this? And she said, I'm so grateful for the support. It would be so much harder to come to court every day if I didn't have these people behind me. And I'm really grateful for it. So, and she was shaking hands, recognizing people, like truly the same energy as when I have tried to interview like a famous person walking through a crowd of fans. Yeah, I don't think she's shying away from it.
Yeah. And look, if she's acquitted, there's money to be made, I guess, either way, from a trial this big. Everyone jokes, but there's probably some truth to the fact that Ben Affleck and Matt Damon or Chris Evans, I forget what he was in, but I just saw a show with him. He's from the Boston area, big actor. They could all be working on stuff. I would not be surprised at all. By the way, if you read Surviving the Survivor, my book about my mom, she predicted the J-Lo, the Bennifer collapse that's going on right now. In the book a year ago, she predicted this was going to fall apart. And so who knew? Carm was all over E! Entertainment as well. But Ida Shaw brings up a comment here, Jonna Spilbor. Back to you on this. Now, I was taught by a guy in TV news when I first started that the smallest mistakes in TV news are the biggest. And I've mentioned this on the air. In other words, I'm interviewing the president and we misspell the president's name on the TV screen. And I spell it Biden, B-Y-D-E-N. No one's watching the interview. They're looking at the mistake. Could it be the smallest thing in this trial that sways the jurors? Ida Shaw's question: what if the jury ignored everything and only focused on Karen's comments? I hit him, provided they believe everyone who testified. There are multiple people who said this. I mean, multiple people who heard with their own ears saying, I hit him, and everyone's going to say it was a question or she was in shock. But what about this aspect to a trial where the evidence maybe takes a back seat, if we're being honest, to something that is like an ear bug, that's something that just gets in there and you can't let it go?
Well, that's also part of the evidence. I think in a case like this, we would be hard pressed to find 12 people to settle on that one earbug. Like somebody in that juror, maybe even a couple people in that jury box might be focused on that. And what that's going to lead us to is a hung jury as opposed to an acquittal or a conviction, because it is a minor salient point. And so it will be probably a topic that they talk about, but I don't think it will be the topic that they hang their hats on. Not that one. There's so many more other bigger issues that they're really going to have to deliberate. Like, there's no manner of death, right? No manner of death. You're trying a murder case with no manner of death. That's huge. The fact that all these experts, the fact that the defense experts are independent adds to their credibility, because you can't argue now that they were hired guns and you can pay an expert to say anything you want an expert to say. That adds to their credibility. There's the text messages from Proctor, the horrific text messages, cloud or overshadow any of the nasty text messages or voicemail messages we heard from Karen Reed. So there's just so much there for them to sink their teeth into, that the smaller stuff is going to stay small. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make.
I feel like it would be amazing if they can get 12 people to agree on this case. Yeah, it's possible that the jury could be hung. You don't know. Just to show you that we're in 2024, firmly entrenched, 68 witnesses, no cause of death from hope, hate, fear. I'm not getting political, but this is just making me laugh. Biden is not our president. I just said he was. As far as I know, he is the current president of the United States. You might not like him, but this is 2024 for you. And hopefully the jurors are more, in line with each other than this. Look at this. I think someone's yelling at me. Unreal, Joel. Your mom is on target. Maybe you should listen to your mom. Have to unsubscribe for the second time. Was giving you another chance. Anita, I'm going to miss you. Come back for a third time's the charm, Anita. I promise. Peter Elican, before you run off the court TV, jury deliberations will get underway tomorrow. You're usually not in that room because you're the criminal defense attorney, but walk us behind the scenes, if you will. What will the judge tell these jurors? And then what will they do when they go into that very secretive little room in the Norfolk County Courthouse?
She will give them the jury instructions that are tried and true, and they've probably been honed over over decades. And that's the main thing. She'll teach them and go over with them beyond a reasonable doubt what that means, and give explanation and give examples of it, and then say, and here's the element you'd have to prove about manslaughter, and here's the elements of the crime of murder in the second degree. So she really will. And then there's all kinds of other things about don't read anything into the idea that maybe the defendant didn't testify, and there's just a whole bunch of instructions that has to go through. And you often wonder if the jury, how much of that can sink in. They're usually very attentive, and I'm stunned how well they listen. But really, after the jury instructions, and they're really then they're sent in, and then they're really on their own. And as I said, for the first time ever, they're going to actually get to talk to each other, and they're probably desperate. I mean, we've all been gossiping and talking to friends and people on the air and all that. And we've got all these, all our ideas out, and these people must be sitting there like a pressure cooker, like, oh, this was a bad thing, or this was a good thing. I need to tell everybody else. So I think that's what it is. As far as the counsel goes, there is a certain, the tension is like, through the roof while waiting for a jury when they're out. Then again, there's also something when there's this feeling of satisfaction sometimes after you've worked that hard and you really think you've done a good job of putting in all the evidence the right way, and it's not going to be perfect, but there is a certain relief that now it's out of my hands. There's nothing I can do. I can't say anything. I can't do anything. I have to just sit back and wait till the jury tells us. And so in some ways, that's kind of a relief too.
Hey, Joel,
yeah, go ahead, Jonna.
Can we talk for a minute about Judge Canoni? Because I don't know her, but I really like her style. I think she commanded a lot of respect. I think she did a great job presiding over this case. Never met the woman before, but it felt like she had a lot of respect in that courtroom, which doesn't come just from one trial. That comes from obviously your reputation, your experience. Christina, you might know more than me because you were sitting.
Jonna, that's so interesting because most people hate on Judge Canoni say she has no control. No, I'm glad to hear that. Christina, you're in the courthouse.
Yeah.
What is the feeling towards Judge Canoni?
In the courtroom, fine. I mean, there's certainly been some tense moments between her and defense attorneys when they've been arguing motions outside of the jury's presence. If there's been moments where David Yannetti or Alan Jackson are trying to give a little bit of flair to their argument, which is their style, and she'll say like, I don't need this. I don't need the hyperbole. She literally said, I don't need the hyperbole at one point. But other than that, you know, and based on people I've talked to in the legal community in Massachusetts and in this courthouse, she has an excellent reputation. She was a public defender for a long time. Now she's a judge. She just presided over another huge trial here, which was, we talked about this, Emmanuel Lopes, the man who is now convicted of killing Sergeant Michael Chesna in Massachusetts. That was two trials on that. The first one was a mistrial, and Judge Canoni was the judge. So in that courtroom, I think she's very well respected. She's had to play referee a lot. And I think all in all, she's done a good job keeping order. And I say this every time I get the chance, the air conditioner really is that loud. And we really do need people to speak up because we cannot hear them in there.
And if I can jump in now too, I'd like to say that as a longtime observer of Massachusetts courts, Judge Canoni always has had a wonderful reputation. She was a superstar public defender and won award after award and, you know, ran programs and all that. And then she's a long-term judge. And I know that people are not going to be happy with all her rulings in an 8-week trial, but I think she really has had good control over the courtroom. I haven't agreed with every one of her rulings, everything she said, but generally speaking, when I kind of weigh her against all the other judges in the state, she is one of the best of the Massachusetts judiciary. She's very, very smart and she has good control of the courtroom. And having said that, I wouldn't agree with every single one of her rulings on this either.
Well said, Peter. From I Can Smell Crazy a Mile Away, I agree with Jonna. Followed right here, just to show you how this trial is. The judge was awful. Should have recused herself. So, yes, two people. You get two different comments. Boston Sarah, who I love, who's very pro the freeing of Karen Reed. Joel, you know I love you, and STS. I'm a big fan of the show. Been here for the long haul. But Jen McCabe, credible? Seriously? Carm nailed it. I don't know. I found her to be somewhat truthful. Call me crazy. You will call me crazy. And I'm a pretty good read of people, I think, for the most part. Peter, before we let you go, because you only have 4 minutes on the clock, tell me, you're a defense attorney. What is Alan Jackson? I assume Jackson's going to do the closing. Christina, do we know that for sure or not?
Yeah, Jackson's doing the closing.
Okay, he's doing the closing. Yannetti, the famous 4 words in the opening was Karen Reed was framed. Those were the first 4 words. What does Alan Jackson need to do tomorrow, Peter Elican, to put a bow on this?
I don't think there's any magic or surprise that we're going to see. I think he's going to go through the evidence and just as we keep kind of hitting home, I know I'm starting to sound repetitious, all the reasonable doubt, but they don't have a cause of, they don't have a method of death. There's no eyewitnesses. Every one of their people who testified, there were knocked holes in them, and they can kind of go through that, and they can go through the strengths of their case. And that's what Jackson can do. So I think that he's got a lot of ammunition. There's times when we criminal defense attorneys have to really scrape the bottom of the barrel, like gee, the evidence was so strong against us, and I got to come up and say something. I can't just not say anything. So you try to do the best you can. In this one, I think he is just loaded with ammunition on what the defense testimony is, and also all the failings and shortcomings of the prosecution, that they were able to kind of knock holes in every single step of the way. And even if at the end of the trial somebody says, I'm not really sure what happened, they just have not proved it beyond a reasonable doubt, which they have to. And so he's just got an awful lot to say, and he's got to condense that into 1 hour. And I kind of like the idea. I think probably as attorneys, they almost are happy with the judge said no more than an hour, because then they don't have to go on for hours and bore everybody and keep rambling on, and they can be much more succinct that way. And it's I know I myself would almost like it if the judge in advance told me, here's limits how far you can go. So be succinct and be pithy and make your points really quick and get in and out of there. And then you're not boring the jury, and the jury likes it if you kind of hit the main points and then you get out of there. And I got to get out of here now. So I feel terrible. I leave now. I'm so enjoying this conversation.
It was a great segue. Enjoy your sound bites, your 9-second sound bites on. I love Court TV, Peter, but enjoy yourself. But here
that was a good segue I gave about getting out of here. Yeah, I didn't plan that. It just came to me. So
we'll have you back soon. Thank you, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Good luck. Bye-bye. To Christina here. If Karen Reed is found not guilty, do you think she's going to do sit-down interviews post-trial like she did early on in the case? What's your gut tell you here?
My gut tells me yes.
Yeah, that's a good gut. I have the same gut feeling. Joel sometimes makes a fool of himself. Still love him. That is my wife, and it's under the name La, whatever that is. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. So Jonna, again, take us inside baseball here. One of the things, I understand, I guess, somewhat like reporting, the economy of words. Peter's talking about condensing it. This is an 8-week Commonwealth trial, plus what we just had with the defense. When you're the defense team, are you literally taking notes for your closings the whole way through? Like, you have a special legal pad with things that you want to hit in your closing. How do they know what points to make specifically tomorrow? How long has this been in the preparation stages for, and how do they pull it off?
My closing argument is written before the first witness is sworn, and the only thing I do after that is fill in some key points that happened during the trial that some pearl, some nugget, something. You just plug those in, something that's going to resonate with the jury. But my closing argument is written before I do anything else. And I only modify it slightly to turn it into an opening statement. And that's kind of my guiding whenever I have a case. That's sort of my guiding light, and what I fashion everything around is how it's going to end. It's like picking up your book, Joel, and turning to the last page to find out how it's going to end. And I do that first. And I'm sure that this defense team has done something similar. I'm going to disagree with Peter now that he's not here and he can't fight with me. I think the closing argument length of an hour each is just a little bit too short for this kind of convoluted, lengthy trial. Like 2 hours each side, I'd be okay with. 1 hour each side, that really requires you to leave some stuff out that you probably want to put in. So they're going to have to pare it down. Even though I believe their closing argument is already written, they're going to have to slice and dice in order to squeeze it into an hour. And
how much leeway is there? By the way, Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead is back. Which part of Jen was credible when she changed her grand jury testimony to hit him 2.5 years? That's what my mom said to me, Bob Weir. Jonna Spilbor, how much leeway is here? When the judge says an hour, is that really an hour, or can they drag it to an hour and 20 minutes?
The judge isn't going to cut somebody off mid-sentence, especially not the defense team, because you don't want to create some sort of unfair trial environment. But she sounds like she says what she means, and she means what she says. And so I think both sides are going to try to really respect that 1 hour. And I don't think it's going to be easy to do, to be honest with you, which is why if I'm on the defense, I am just hitting all my key points of reasonable doubt. And if you have, let's say they have a dozen key points of reasonable doubt, now they're going to pare that down to 6 and give you, their top 6 instead of their top 12, and maybe tell the jury that they're constrained by time, but they can use their common sense, and anything else that struck them as being doubtful, that they can still consider it, even though you're not including it in your closing argument.
We got an interesting look at what the closings might look like today at that charging hearing.
Say that, Christina. Say that again. You broke up on my end.
Sorry. Yeah, we got an interesting look at what closings might look like just a little bit today during that charging hearing, because Judge Canoni was asking like what the lawyers would need for tech purposes if they were using any displays in their closing arguments. And the defense attorneys just said they were using side-by-side pictures of the car and the tail light. I think that's all they said. There might have been something else. I'm curious what this is going to look like in practice. Is that Adam Lally, or actually it was ADA McLaughlin, the prosecutor said they're using some kind of a timeline with the text messages and phone calls and other pieces of evidence. They're crafting and planning on displaying some type of a timeline, which, you heard Adam Lally's opening statements. It was just kind of a list of witnesses. So it'll be interesting to hear what this timeline construction looks like.
Scott McGinnis, Court TV, OMG, I'm going to puke. At least this show somewhat makes sense sometimes. Thank you for that incredible endorsement there. I appreciate it. Look at this. This is probably the only comment, but I will read it out loud. Joel's the only one making sense to me. I just think there's this is a word my mom would use, but probably not the correct word. But there's sort of a mass hysteria on both sides. I mean, Jonna, this is the one case where you just can't, if you just say anything that doesn't align with the side that side wants you to align with, there's immediate pushback. Do you recall anything like this in your time covering cases?
No, although I will say, and this wasn't a criminal case, but do you remember Johnny Depp, Amber Heard? Yes. People quickly got on Johnny Depp's side, and Amber Heard, all the memes. I still think of those memes and chuckle. Like, so people took a side and you weren't going to move them off their side. That's the biggest one that comes to mind, because even in cases, Alec Murdaugh, most people thought he was guilty, pretty much immediately, but some people didn't. But I think Johnny Depp is the biggest example of, once you chose a side, you were on that side, nothing was going to move you off.
Listen, anything I say, I'm not trying to annoy people. I'm just telling you honestly how I feel. And I've seen people say, look, you can't be a fence sitter on this case. I'm not a fence sitter. I'm just telling you, I have so many questions. I think I have more questions now than I had at the beginning of this trial. And look at Hope 8 Fear. I've been on the fence until today. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just being honest with you. If I had a clear-cut answer in my head, but look, these expert witnesses are across the board. Even the medical examiner is saying this is not from a car. But Jonna, let me ask you a question, because I'd seen some things. This is Phil Waters, Scott McGinnis. I am biased as heck. There you go. I love it. Scott can admit I am biased. At least if you could admit it, that's a step in the right direction. Jonna, what if John O'Keefe was bent over? I keep thinking about this when he was struck by this car. Why wouldn't the Commonwealth have shown possibilities of positions that he could have been in to show that there's more than one possibility? Because people assume he's just standing upright and gets smacked by a car, which there's no the injuries don't align for that type of vehicular accident. But why, if you're the Commonwealth, not display multiple options for multiple scenarios? Is that just too much work? What does that come down to?
They might not have had the witnesses to support those theories. I mean, they didn't even have a strong ME. I mean, she was a credible ME. I'm not criticizing her personally, but in terms of helping them prove their case, she was almost rather neutral. So I think they didn't have. You can have all the theories in the world, but as a prosecutor, even a defense attorney, you can't just espouse them. You've got to have evidence to back them up in order for them to be meaningful. And I don't know, like, for example, I think we've seen pictures of John O'Keefe. I think he had hair on the top of his head. Like, well, if that theory were true, if he were bent over, then we'd have hair somewhere in the taillights, or we'd have hair evidence. And I don't think anybody testified to that unless I missed it.
Yeah, they did.
By the way, I wouldn't get too worked up about my opinion. I would save your energy for other people that are a lot smarter, as someone is trying to break into it's either Ethel or Fred are trying to break into my home at the moment. Christina, walk us through what happened. By the way, Lassa Lucidora here. How can you have written your book about my mom being a Holocaust survivor without understanding the power of conspiracies? There was no real conspiracy there. They grabbed my grandfather and threw him in a gas chamber. But I get what you're saying here. Christina, what happened with this charging conference? What was that about? What was the point of it? How long did it last? What did the judge say? What did the defense and Commonwealth say?
Yeah. So, and Jonna will probably have good perspective on this also. It's like a routine procedural hearing because after closing arguments, the judge reads instructions to the jury. And they're both instructions about what the charges are in this case, the elements of those charges, defining what the elements of those charges mean, as well as, like, we've heard the judge give instructions throughout the course of trial. It's like a summary of those as well. An instruction about, you saw they talked about specifically some of the instructions she was going to give. So I have some of them here. The presumption of innocence, an instruction about evidence that will have redactions on it and why those exist. Anything you saw outside this courtroom doesn't count as evidence. She's going to give an instruction about witness credibility and how the jury has to consider that. She's going to give an instruction about the emotional or the autopsy photos they saw that might elicit an emotional reaction to tell them that they can't make a decision based on that emotional reaction. And so basically the conversation with the attorneys was that they pitched some, definition tweaks or things that they wanted included, and they kind of all come to a consensus. Obviously, the judge is the ultimate decider on that. There's one that hasn't been decided yet for jury instruction. There's an instruction about consciousness of guilt with Karen Reed, and the prosecutors argued it today, saying basically timeline evidence about Karen that morning, taking her car, moving it to her parents' house, going to John's house, packing up her things. They believe deleting Ring video off of John's computer in that time she was upstairs packing her bags. And they want a consciousness of guilt instruction introduced as a result of that. And the defense said that none of that is evidence. That's not enough. So basically the judge is going to have to decide on that. Otherwise,
That's
it's pretty
interesting.
Yeah. Otherwise it was pretty routine.
Jonna, what about that consciousness of guilt? And we've heard about this potentially deleted Ring video. How does a judge decide what shows the appearance of potential consciousness of guilt and what doesn't?
That's a really, really tough call. And sometimes it's baked into the cake. Like, for example, like here in New York, if you do certain things or don't do certain things, you are presumed to have a consciousness of guilt. And so that's kind of an automatic jury instruction. Here, this is a really tough call because it's requiring the judge make a determination based on the evidence that came into trial when she's not the trier of fact. I mean, we forget that. The trier of fact are the people sitting in that jury box. So that's going to be a very tough call. And personally, I think whenever she errs on the side of the prosecution, although Christina could probably speak way better to that than me because you've been in the courtroom. So if she's going to err, it would be in favor of the prosecution there. But I also have to say, this is such a tough job, you guys. Like, you take 12 people who don't do this for a living and you put them in a box and you make them listen to evidence for 2 months. And then at the end of the day, they've got to cull through all that, put it together, put pieces together, take pieces apart. It's like a very lousy analogy is, because I don't cook, if somebody took a bag of groceries and dumped them on my table and said, okay, there you go, do something with those without a recipe or some sort of instruction, I'm just going to open the beer because that's the easiest thing I know how to do. They don't know anything about the law and what they're supposed to be putting together until they fetter through those instructions. And the instructions are not easy. They're weighty instructions. So you got to hand it to jurors because it's not an easy job. And this jury in particular is not going to have an easy job. There's a lot to go through.
Not at all. John Blaze. What a great name. I was going to buy Joel's book until I found out what a grifter he is. Do me a favor, at least come up with a better word. It's like the laziest word. It's like every troll on Twitter uses the word grifter. Please come up with something better. Please call me anything. Call me a sociopath. Call me dumb. Call me something. Just don't call me a grifter. It's just so lazy. STS live chat poll. Karen Reed will be found not guilty, 85%. Guilty on manslaughter, not murder, 6%. Guilty on all charges, 4%. Hung jury, 5%. Looks like if we were the jury pool, Karen Reed would be walking free here. So thank you to the COE for this. Look, I told you the third time's a charm. Anita here resubscribed for a third time and waited 5-minute penalty to say, calling you crazy. Jen McCabe is the most narcissistic liar in the entire trial. And you think she's credible. Barf, bye-bye, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya. Anita, I still love you. I'll tell you what, it's been a good lesson, Jonna and Christina, in growing a thick skin during this trial. Because if you don't, Christina, have you, the sweetest person on earth, who no one could troll, have you been trolled at all during this trial? Yes or no?
Of course I have. Yes.
Let's see. Now, if Christina, who's actually sweet and nice and kind, is getting trolled, then I know that there is a problem. So, I don't know what to tell you. Let's get to these witnesses for a couple minutes. Dr. Frank Sheridan, Christina, he was a real character. He's an Irishman. He came on. He's a former medical examiner for San Bernardino County. He said he reviewed the autopsy report, the neuropathology, the toxicology, the autopsy photos, the photos taken at scene, the photos of the vehicles. He called these friction injuries, and went on to basically say that it is it's not consistent with being struck by a vehicle, at least the arm injuries. He was speaking about that specifically. What was the response to his testimony in the courtroom? It sounded like he had a little trouble breathing, maybe some COPD, something along those lines, which was made worse, I think, by the courtroom air conditioner. But the overall reaction to his testimony today.
The reaction was that he was hard to hear, to be honest. The air conditioners had to go off while he was testifying. I had my headphone in at one point because I couldn't hear him. So I put the stream on and listened in the courtroom. The breathing you heard on the stream was not nearly as loud in person. I think that was accentuated on the stream. I don't know. I can't really distinguish between the jurors' reactions to him versus the medical examiner who did the autopsy versus Dr. Russell. They're kind of pretty neutral in listening to all the doctors who've testified. You don't see much reaction from them. And he's clearly an older guy, right? There was a lot of repeating that had to be done, repeating questions. Maybe he couldn't hear a question at some points or had to have a question rephrased. But if this says anything, I do reporting on all different platforms, but I put a 2-minute story on TV at the end of every day, and he didn't make it in my story today. Because I have to take what the of the day were, and I'm not sure he was one of them.
Now, this comment here really hurts me from Brenda Lord. Joel, his vocabulary is not that vast. I did go to Brandeis University, and I scored very well on my verbal section of my SATs. It hurts, I'll tell you why, because my dad, that's no longer with us, he used to make me read Moby Dick with him, and Nathaniel Hawthorne, Herman Melville, all the great stories.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I told you I'm not that quick, so I take that back. Thank you. Now I feel better. I can actually, that was the one comment that was going to put me over the edge there. Anyone else could. If you get to my vocabulary, then I might get upset. Jonna Spilbor, we got Trooper Paul, the accident reconstructionist that had a real hard time on the stand. And then we've got Trooper Proctor, who was using the see you next Tuesday word that most people don't like. Kind of the battle of the worst investigators on this case. And I've been reading, and people seem to think that Trooper Paul could actually be more of a hindrance to the Commonwealth than Trooper Proctor. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on this, about who was the worst trooper here.
Well, Proctor was, the worst in a different kind of way. And what I think a jury is going to do with both of them, because they're cops, they're going to run that testimony, that evidence through their own filter. And I think jurors do this a lot. they're going to put themselves in a defendant's shoes, even though like none of us can really put ourselves in a defendant's shoes. We don't think we're ever going to do anything wrong. Hopefully we don't. But if you're being treated badly by somebody who's your tax dollars pay so they can protect and serve, you want them to act accordingly. You don't want them to play favorites. You don't want them to ignore evidence. You certainly don't want them to be treating you like your gum underneath their shoe because they don't like you. That's going to color the search for the truth. And I agree, again, Peter's not here, but I agree. Prosecutors are searching for the truth, but defense attorneys are searching for reasonable doubt. And if you're the person under investigation and a cop can't respect the process so much so that like, how dumb do you have to be? And I don't really even mean to be mean. Like, you're gonna text that stuff. You don't think that's gonna come out and discuss, like, keep that to yourself. Go talk about it with your buddies at the bar. Don't put anything in writing that you'd be embarrassed to have a judge read out loud. That was one of the first lessons I ever learned as a young attorney. And they should follow their own advice. And so that's damaging. And it's going to be, the juries can run that through their own personal filter and see how that feels. And it's not going to be a boon to the prosecution. That's for sure.
So Eliza Little, you know this, Christina Rex, was doing the cross on Dr. Sheridan, the Scottish doctor. And she says, what injuries would you have to have if he was struck by a vehicle? And he says it's going to cause at least bruising. This particular case, one of the things that struck me was the distinct absence of bruising. And then asked if John O'Keefe's injuries are consistent with a fight or altercation. And he says, in a general sense, they could be. So even the experts can't say, yeah, 100%, but he's definitely leaning towards it not being a car accident. As I said, the medical examiner, I was not crocheting during this point, even though M says that. But Christina, is it game over there? I mean, is that it? Is it game over because we've got the experts saying these injuries are not consistent with a vehicle crash?
Yeah, I can actually, I think, tie together all the last things you were just talking about with that. I will point out, I'm sorry to be a stickler, but Eliza Little did direct examination on him because it was the defense's witness here.
I'm sorry.
But no, you're good.
Did I say cross? Did I say cross?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're so used to doing cross for 28 days, right?
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, I'm not going to say if it's game over, but here's the thing is that this is something that when the defense team moved for a required finding of not guilty, which is like a really routine thing to do at the end of the prosecution's case. But when they moved for it, what they argued was in order to convict Karen Reed on any of the crimes listed here, you have to believe that she was driving her car and hit John O'Keefe, which caused his death. That is what ties together Trooper Paul. That's what ties together all these medical examiners. And so if any juror doesn't believe, based on that medical examiner testimony, that those injuries aren't from a car, then that is it, right?
Yep. I mean, that's it. In theory, it is. Yeah, Jonna, I mean, pick up on that. In theory, if these defense experts and Commonwealth experts, even for the state, are saying it's not consistent with a car accident, how in the world can they convict? They can't, right? I mean, they just can't.
No, you would think not. And again, that we talked about a little earlier in the show, that is the thread that unravels everything. If all 12 jurors can't agree on how he died, it is game over. And the prosecution's in an untenable position where it's their case. They knew ahead of time what the witnesses were going to be. They almost have to discount or explain away their own medical examiner, for instance. And that's very hard to do. That requires juries to take a huge leap over, evidence that it was the prosecution's job to present. It's their burden of proof. So that's going to be very difficult for the prosecution to navigate. And when we were talking earlier, when Christina said that we think the prosecution is going to present its closing argument by presenting a timeline, I don't even see how that helps the prosecution at all, like the whole timeline, because we know that there are issues with the timeline. We know that there are issues with the time that certain texts, like how long does it take someone to die in the cold, even though that was all misspelled. We know there are issues with that, and that doesn't prove the manner of death. So I don't know why they think that's the tack to take, But I'm very curious. I can't wait. I can't wait to hear what they have to say.
That's interesting. By the way, that was refuted by experts, at least the Commonwealth experts, 2 experts, that search happened later than the 2:27 a.m. timeline. Danielle Fair says Brian Albert, a cop, didn't come out of the house to see what happened because he already knew what happened. There's the implication. I was trying to stay away from this, Christina, but let's have a little fun and have more people yell at me. Christina, what was the chatter today about that Turtle Boy video that was downright crazy? So for those who do not know, Turtle Boy went to D&E Pizza last night. He filmed it, and then someone got out of their car and basically slapped his cell phone out. I will tell you my 2 cents. It's the eve, basically, of closing arguments. You're a reporter. You're not supposed to be the center of the story. That's the way Turtle Boy has handled it, putting himself in the center. He did it again. He was instigating. Obviously, I mean, there's no other way to say it. He was instigating, and someone slapped the cell phone out of his hand. What was the talk in the courtroom, Christina?
Okay, so no talk in the courtroom, but I literally just got confirmation, like in my email while we're on this podcast, from Canton Police that the 2 people who were a part of that with Aiden, with Turtle Boy, are facing charges. They were charged for assault, and this, again, perfectly illustrates like the 2 worlds of this trial. In the courtroom, that didn't come up once, not even amongst chatter between the reporters in the corner, not amongst lawyers to the judge. I mean, it was a non-factor in the courtroom. And Aiden was in there as a credentialed reporter again today.
He was there today?
Yeah, he was there today.
Just
like he has been most other days. Okay. On the other side of things, outside in the morning, while we're all waiting in the media line, and it could also be the fact that there were so many more Karen Read supporters there than usual. He had people coming by talking about what happened last night. He was chit-chatting with them about it, taking selfies after talking about it. So it was kind of all the gossip outside on the sidewalk, and then didn't get talked about again once we were in the courthouse.
What's been the reaction of other reporters to Turtle Boy? Let's just continue on for a moment. Now I'm going to get you. Now I'm going to get you.
I will say that I think that everyone, and it's interesting. It's like very middle school at times. So you said reporters are never supposed to be in the story, right? Mm-hmm. I have bitten my tongue. I have really, really gone out of my way to not ever become a part of this story. I just want to cover it. And I just want to report on what happens. That hasn't been the case for everyone who's in the courtroom, but I think that a lot of the drama around that has taken place online, because with the exception of a couple media line fights, which I can tell you about, in the courtroom, everybody's been very respectful of one another. I mean, we have to coexist in this teeny tiny corner. It's not comfortable. Many of the seats are standing room only. I wore sneakers for the first time today because I was like, I just can't do heels again today. I need a break. And being in that environment face to face, people are not so brave face to face, right? Everybody's been very respectful to one another. And in that environment, it's been fine. I think any of the drama surrounding his presence or people who are on the opposite side of him, that all takes place on Twitter, and we do not see it in the courtroom.
If she's found not guilty, he'll have less of, I guess, a soapbox to stand on. If something goes on where she is found guilty on a lesser charge, you're definitely going to hear a lot more from him. I have a feeling either way, we're going to be hearing a lot more from TB. The only ones faster than the keyboard trolls are the STS mods. This is so true. Thank you to the best team, Gen X Granny, Copperhorse, Shaquille Oatmeal. The best name in all the social medias is Shaquille Oatmeal, Julie Frew, and Frankie Figs. This is a question. This goes back to, and the COE keeps taking it down. The science and physics say he wasn't hit by a car. That's what just to be clear, that's what the defense experts said today, which is true if you believe the defense experts. But you got to know where your information is coming from. That's one thing I've learned about being a news guy for a long time. Please send even more hate mail. But this goes back, Jonna Spilbor, and then I promise we'll start to wrap it up here. Alley Cat, I love that Jonna puts her glasses on like me. How did Christina doesn't need, do you wear glasses, Christina?
I don't, sorry.
Yeah. Young and she doesn't need
Will.
glasses.
Right.
John and I, we both kind of hate you. How did John get fragments of the tail light in his sweatshirt? So this came up because on the cross of this medical examiner today, Jonna, Adam Lally says you didn't perform the autopsy yourself. You just read reports, correct? He says, correct. He says, do you know that Chloe actually bit, meaning the dog, someone else? Did you even look at photos? No, I did not know that happened. And then he goes on, Adam Lally, and says, tiny pieces of taillight were found on John O'Keefe's sweatshirt. Hair DNA, which I know is controversial, found on the car. The doctor admits he did not know any of this. Do you think if he had known this, and remember, this is a third-party expert. This is not an expert hired by is the medical exam. I'm sorry. Was this medical examiner? I'm sorry, Christina. Was he hired by the defense?
He was. Yep.
He was. Okay. So he was hired by the defense. So he did not know any of this information, Jonna. Could that have swayed, the way he saw things play out had he known about these microscopic pieces of taillight found on John O'Keefe's sweatshirt? And just along the same lines of I hit him, are jurors going to, when they go into the deliberation room, are they going to say, how did these microscopic pieces of taillight get on this guy's sweatshirt?
I think that's an important piece of evidence. What will the jury do with it? Because I thought about that too. And the prosecution did with that hired gun what they do, right? They say, well, you didn't look at everything. You weren't there. You didn't do it yourself. So they poke holes in the person's credibility and in their professional expert opinion. But what I found, that was running through my brain too. But when I heard the other expert who was talking about a theory that really hadn't come up, and that is the throwing of the cocktail glass at the taillight, maybe that's how, just like, you have blood spatter, you have other things, transfer evidence, perhaps it came that way, and or a jury's going to discount that evidence and say, well, that's not big enough for us to pay attention to. Let's move on to another piece. So they have two ways that they can get around, for lack of a better word, that taillight evidence. And, and again, that goes back to your point about earworms or, what are they going to hang their hats on? What's going to stick in their craw? And will that color how they decide this case? We're going to have to wait and see.
We can argue this till the cows come home. TB didn't eat at the pizza place. He was just standing on the sidewalk antagonizing everyone. And I have no personal beef with Turtle Boy. I've had him. He's come on the show. I have some issues with the way he treats certain people, but I'm sure he has issues with the way maybe I treat certain people. I have no idea, but you can slice it any which way you want. He was out there and he was purposely antagonizing people. Just the fact that he's there. There's plenty other places for him to have been the night before this big day today. Alice Ryder, my prediction, not guilty before the end of the day tomorrow, assuming it goes to jury by lunch. She is an attorney, by the way. Wow. Someone was yelling at me about something. Lady B is a new member here. So I guess we will close this out. There's a question I saw here. For those who do not know, Christina Rex is a reporter for WBZ. She's been in the courtroom all but I think 2 days. By the way, the Florida Panthers were up 3-0. Now it's 3-3 as they go into Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals tonight from Florida. Christina Rex, tomorrow, I'm not going to ask you to predict because you're a reporter, but they're going to have closings. They will start to deliberate. What is the plan from what's the plan for WBZ to cover this? It could go a week. It could go an hour. It could go 3 weeks. We just don't know. Are you going to be sitting at the courtroom twiddling your thumbs while waiting for this verdict?
In sneakers.
Yeah, so in sneakers. So we got a good practice round of this, if you will.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Christina, did the defense hire Dr. Sheridan? They did not hire the accident reconstructionist, but did they hire
Dr. Sheridan was not an independent medical examiner.
There you go.
He was brought by the defense.
So there you go, Patty P.
We don't know if they paid him, how much. I don't know any of that. We just know that he was brought by the defense. The accident reconstructionist were hired by the FBI and were completely third-party witnesses that just happened to benefit the defense.
Patty P, I'll forgive you because your dog is so cute. Go ahead, Christina. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I was going to say we got a good practice at this, if you will, during jury selection, which went on for many days. And frankly, other than reporting the number of people who show up, nothing happens that I can report during jury selection. So yet I was there at the courthouse every day and managed to find a way. We just talked about this for an hour and a half. I mean, there's plenty to talk about with this case, right? So our plan is that I will be there every day. If this goes on for days, I will find a way to continue to do stories that keep the conversation moving, whether that's with legal experts or supporters or protesters who are outside of the courthouse. Anybody who's involved in this case, any conversations about this case, we'll continue covering while we wait for a verdict. When the verdict comes down, it's chaos for journalists. We're going to have multiple crews there covering multiple angles. We were told today we'll get a 30-minute heads up, which isn't a ton of time, but it's enough to kind of get in place. And it really just depends what time it all happens. But my boss will be very proud of me if right now I tell you when the verdict comes in, we'll be streaming it on CBS News Boston, streaming the verdict, streaming all of the reaction when everybody comes out of court and probably talks. Rather than giving you like the edited story we do every day, we're just going to take it all live. So
Christina,
I think there's
can you do me a favor? When that jury comes back with their verdict, please make a note of who they're looking at when they come back in that courtroom.
I will.
All right.
I will.
Thank you.
Jonna, explain that, please. By the way, before you do that, Dr. Vonda K. Joel, I finished this is the grifter side of me. I need to live up to my name. Finished the Audible version of your book today. It was fantastic. I'm going to read it again. I must say the Siri component was hilarious and quite disruptive in a good way. Thank you, Dr. Vonda K. To you, Jonna, I'm sorry, I was reading 27 comments in one split second. Who should they be looking at, and what will that tell you?
To me, it is always a telltale sign. If they come in and their heads are down and they're trying hard not to look at anybody, it's usually a guilty verdict. But if they come in and there's a little skip in their step and they're looking around and they're not afraid to look at people, then, and this is just my test, then I think it could be a not guilty verdict. But you never can tell. I mean, those are my tea leaves. But I think it'll be interesting. Have they been engaged, Christina? I love that you're actually in the courtroom. Like, have they been looking at Karen Reed? Have they, no, they don't look at her?
I have noticed that very few of them spend time looking at her. They are eyes on the witness and eyes on the lawyer asking the questions. It's interesting. Part of that could be right. Something that I've commented on and many people have commented on is when you look at the table right there, there's 4 of them. Karen Reed looks like one of her own attorneys. I mean, they're all in neutral colored, dark suits, and she's there taking notes, typing notes, handing pieces of evidence back to the text guy. Like, she's working as though she's one of the attorneys there. So I kind of wonder if that makes her, I don't know, look like less of a defendant to the jury, but I don't notice them spending a lot of time staring at her.
Kendra S. with a good way of saying this. She's either not guilty or she's the luckiest defendant ever to have all these circumstances that just so happen to cause reasonable doubt, and a ton of it at that. That's one way to look at it. Scott McGinnis, I'm reading your comment out loud too. I literally come to this channel to see inane and biased propagandist guests. He puts them on here, not court TV bad, but still, I would say I'm the only propagandist here, Scott McGinnis. How dare you say that about, how can you say that? I've got 2 criminal defense attorneys and a reporter, Scott McGinnis. Open that brain of yours up a little and let some common sense seep in, just like Jonna Spilbor. Yeah. She is a popular and outspoken attorney, a columnist, a legal analyst. She's on the Fox News channel, the Fox Business Network. She says she's even got her own radio show. Joel, are you going to try to go live? Yes, we are going to be here for closing arguments tomorrow, beginning at 9 a.m. with special guest analysts. And the minute the verdict is read, we are going to take it live. We're going to be on verdict watch with you. You can come here. You can come to the WBZ. You can go to World News Tonight, anywhere, but go somewhere and watch the verdict being read. Jonna Spilbor, your final thoughts here. You're the criminal defense attorney. Is Alan Jackson going to sleep well tonight, or is he going to be up all night?
Well, that's a good question. I guess I would leave with one tip for the defense and for the jury. They have to remember that the defense does not have to solve this crime. It's not their job, even though they kind of went into it sort of wanting to solve the crime, the whole conspiracy theory, the frame job. I get it. They don't have to prove that to the jury. They just have to make sure the jury realizes how much reasonable doubt. There's more than one piece of evidence that leads to reasonable doubt. Make sure the jury knows that. And it seems like they might have a win for the defense in this case.
Let me leave you with this for no particular reason tonight. I wrote this in my book. I think I was feeling emotional. It's been a roller coaster ride. I'm on this book tour. I'm with Carm. I'm trying to run a show. It looks glamorous. Oftentimes it is not at all. It can be very, very stressful. You never know what someone is going through, what they are feeling. Everyone's all worked up about this case. You don't know who's miserable, who's really happy inside, who's having a good day, who's having a bad day. So just be kind to everybody like this and tell us we had a great panel tonight, which we did. Neely said there's a verdict tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern time. There's a lot of people struggling out there, and this is one way to distract attention, I guess, in the person's life. So no matter which way this verdict goes, understand that I don't think anyone has sinister intentions. The judicial system will play itself out. Be kind, as my hat says somewhere. It says, be kind. I got it at CrimesCon. It says, be kind. Don't kill anyone. Let's all live our lives that way. Huge thanks to Jonna Spilbor, Peter Elican, a criminal defense attorney, each of them, one out of Boston, one out of New York, and Christina Rex. Christina, good luck tomorrow in the courtroom. We will be live with closing arguments at 9 a.m. Until then, love you, America. Love you, Canton, Mass. And hopefully we get justice for John O'Keefe in one form or another, but let's keep him in our thoughts.